2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Opportunity China's pre-departure training session on moving to China, pre-departure preparations, and everything that you need to know when arriving in China for the first time. Thank you very much to those of you who are able to join us today. The majority of you have let us know that you're going to be watching these sessions a little bit later. So that's no problem whatsoever. This will be recorded and put up on YouTube straight after it's finished. My name is Will. Many of you might have seen me or have spoken to me over the past few months on your journey towards China. You might notice that I am also joined by another member of Opportunity China staff. This is Hannah, who is right next to me, who was a Teach China graduate program participant a few years ago, living and working initially in the south of China in Foshan, before going on to live and work in Zhejiang or Jiangsu province, was it? I can't quite remember.
Yeah, Zhejiang province in the city of Jiashan. Little small city though.
Marvellous. And Hannah will be very helpfully joining us today to chat through her experience of living and working in China and to help us learn a little bit more about China from a first-hand experience from an Opportunity China alumni. So, Hannah, it'd be great to learn a little bit more about your experience. Would you be able to just briefly introduce yourself and let us know a bit about your background, when you went to China, where you lived, and what you taught?
Yeah, sure. So I've graduated from Bangor in 2017, many years ago in a simpler time, and then moved to China straight afterwards. I spent a year as a kindergarten teacher in Foshan, in the south of China, and then moved up to be a science teacher in Zhejiang province. And I was a science teacher for a year and a half, and then I spent a year learning Mandarin, and I've just completed that, and I am hoping to go back to China in the future.
Marvellous. So you're wanting to go back to China in the future. What is it that really made you want to move back there? What is it you loved about China that made you want to go back?
It's interesting, actually, because when I first went there, I went thinking I'll just spend a year there, get some experience and then leave. But with China, there's just so much to see and do. You could go somewhere new every weekend and still never run out of things to do. And I think people see China as just this one place, just China, but actually the north, south, east, west are all so different to each other. And even the regions within the north, east, south, west are also super different to each other. And I just feel like everything compared to the UK is just worlds apart from the culture, people, work life. And some people struggle with that. Some people find it to be something that's really exciting. For me, it really draws me in. It feels like the closest thing you're ever going to get to going to an alien planet. Just everything is so different.
I really struggled with when I first got to China was just how many people there were coming from a little village in the southeast of England and then suddenly being surrounded by millions of people with so much energy and so much footfall all around me. That was a bit tough. What did you find a bit tricky when you first arrived, Hannah?
For me, I think because in the first few weeks when you get there, everything is just so different. You're a bit mind blown and you're not really taking in a lot of what's around you because there's just so much to take in. I think for me, it might have been food initially because when I was in Foshan, there weren't many Western options. And I wasn't super used to the food when I got there. And I think also being prepared in terms of things I was taking with me, I didn't realize it's really difficult to buy deodorant in China. I would have brought some with me if I'd have known that. And also my VPN. My VPN wasn't set up before I went there very well, and that led to a couple of difficulties. So I'd really recommend getting that sorted and maybe even having like a free backup version as well of a different brand, just because VPNs can be a bit not super reliable. So it's always best to have a backup option, but definitely having that sorted before you go is the best thing to do. The more prepared you are, the smoother the transition will be.
Awesome. You were talking about all of the different areas of China and sort of the variety that exists there. What's the best place you've been to?
Definitely Shanghai. I love Shanghai. It's like a city that's from the future. I don't know how many of the viewers have seen Shanghai, the skyline and the river area, but it's beautiful, super modern, really fast paced, really vibrant. To be honest, if any of the graduates watching do get the chance to go, maybe I'd recommend that you don't go because you'll be like me, just completely obsessed. You won't want to go anywhere else ever again. But it's an incredible city.
Oh, it's amazing, isn't it? Did you ever get the chance to go down south to Shenzhen?
I regret so much not spending time in Shenzhen. I always pass through it to go to Hong Kong, another great place to visit. But I always just went through it on the bus, and now learning more about it, it's like the San Francisco of China. So I would love to go.
Oh, awesome, awesome. Oh, that's fantastic. That's really, really cool. Um, and when I went there, it really was like stepping into the future. It just was like a totally new world going into it.
Yeah, I've heard in Shenzhen as well, you can get Uber Eats delivered on a drone because it's that futuristic. So definitely want to spend some time there.
Yeah, I think they're definitely starting to try to bring that sort of thing in. What do you think's the biggest thing people get wrong about China? The biggest misconception you've experienced about China?
That's a really good question because honestly, there's a lot of misconceptions. I think one of them might be thinking, oh, I don't need to know any Chinese when I go to China. That is true on some level. Me in my first year, I didn't know any Chinese. You can survive. You can get by without speaking a word of Chinese ever. However, I think it really changes your experience if you do put a bit of time into learning Mandarin. You start to understand your surroundings and also engage with the people around you a lot more. And the reality is most foreigners in China don't learn any Mandarin before they go. So locals really enjoy it when you can speak a little bit, even if it's just hello, thank you, a little bit goes a long way. And it really does make it that extra more rewarding as well. Even if it's just talking with a taxi driver about the weather in really bad Chinese, it really adds to the experience.
Mm.
And one more misconception, I think the food. So I mentioned earlier I was quite surprised by the food. I thought I knew what Chinese food was. I had a Chinese takeaway every Friday. I thought this will be easy for me. It's not the same. It's completely different. So if you're anywhere near a Chinatown in the UK or wherever you're watching from, I'd really recommend going there and trying some of the food from those restaurants. It's a lot more legit because otherwise you might be a bit surprised when you get there.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Awesome. What's your favorite food actually in China? What's your favorite item that you had?
That's an easy question. I really like a dish. Its Chinese name is Yusheng Qiezi. And when that's in English, it translates into sea spicy aubergine. And that might sound a bit gross at first, but it's nothing to do with the sea or the ocean. It's not fishy at all. And it's eggplant mixed with a few different vegetables and then a garlic sauce, and it's divine. It is so good. So if anyone gets the chance, definitely try it.
Very, very nice. Excellent, excellent. And finally, what's your top practical tip for preparing to teach in China for those who are looking at going out? What's your number one practical tip to say to everyone?
Yeah, so for me, I would say, based on my experience, the TEFL certificate that I did taught me a lot about grammar, taught me a lot about the English language and the mechanisms of the English language, but it didn't really prepare me to be in front of a class of 24 4-year-olds. I didn't know what to do with them, really. So what I would recommend is actually going on YouTube. And so when you know what age group you'll be teaching, if it's kindergarten, elementary, middle school, high school, go on YouTube. There'll be lots of first-hand accounts from teachers, and they'll share a lot of tips for classroom management, how to keep them entertained, how to keep them engaged, what material works really well. And one final thing as well, having a reward system. When you're teaching in China, you don't matter. What matters is the board of stars that you have on the wall behind you. It really keeps students motivated. So I'd say those are my two top tips.
Marvelous, marvelous, fantastic. And you say you're planning on heading back to China at some point in the future. What is it that draws you back? What is it that's really wanting to sort of bring you back? What's the biggest thing you miss?
I think for me, being back in the UK, honestly, I feel like there's less opportunity in the UK. I know that might sound strange, but instead of it's almost like the American dream has gone to China. I see so many people go there and become really, really successful. And for me, particularly, having spent so much time learning Mandarin, I'd really like to go back and use it on the ground and use it in real life and use it in my career in some ways. And I just feel like in China there are so many opportunities and just really helps you grow. I know it sounds quite cheesy, but it really does help me grow as a person. And you experience so many new crazy things sometimes that I just feel like you would never ever be bored in China. There's always a new challenge, there's always something new to learn, something new to see or experience, and just those memories alone are really drawing me back in.
Excellent. I totally agree. You know, it's just a place where you can really experience the totality of life, the craziness, the busyness, the claustrophobia, but also the openness as well that comes with living in China, just how open people are, how friendly they are, how helpful they are. I think everyone has a China moment where they've sort of been helped by someone. Mine was when I used to put my debit card in the cash machine in China. You know, it gives it to you after the money, right? I don't know if you were still in China in the time where cash was still kind of used.
I think I was in that transition phase.
Well, I was definitely there where you still used cash before. By the way, China is a cashless society now almost entirely. You use WeChat Pay, which you will all learn how to use very soon.
Even beggars on the street, they have a WeChat code for you to scan, so there's no excuse for not donating.
They do. It is just it's a wonderful dystopia, but also an amazing, hilarious place as well. Brilliant for that. But there was a chap who had obviously come out the machine after me when I was really tired at the end of a working day, and I just left my card in the machine as an automatic reflex. And he had just gone. He had seen that a foreigner's name was on the card, and he was just going around asking people if there was a foreigner anywhere. And I could just hear him when I ran back to go get my card. And it's that sort of openness and friendliness and helpfulness of people in China that it's just wonderful, isn't it? Just a quick one before you head off, if I can, just really quickly, is have you ever had any little experience like that, Hannah?
Yeah, honestly, so many. So I would go study in Starbucks after work, and the bathrooms weren't in Starbucks, they were across the mall. I could walk across the mall and back with confidence, just leaving my laptop and my valuable possessions. Wouldn't recommend it just in case, but I would do that, knowing with full confidence it would just be there when I came back. And once a friend gave me a lift somewhere, and I had my laptop bag with me, and I was like, "Oh, can you open the boot so we can put this away?" And they were like, "Why?" And I was like, "Oh, because you don't want to entice any robbers or anything." And they were like, "This is China, it's fine." So I think there definitely is that element of safety. And yeah, I lost my wallet once, and it was picked up by a stranger on the street, and they took it to the police station, and the police got in touch. So there really is just a warmth and a welcomeness there. And that's another reason to learn Chinese as well, because then you can really engage with them on a deeper level. And your Chinese friends will always want to take you out for dinner. I've been invited to birthday parties when I couldn't speak Chinese, didn't know what was going on around me, but you always feel welcome. You always feel like there's a place for you among your Chinese co-workers and friends. And I think that's something that's really nice to go to, especially if you're graduating and you're not used to being in a foreign country.
Totally. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, Hannah. It's so lovely to see you again, and really great to have you answering questions about your experience in China. I hope you have a lovely evening. I know you're still keeping up studying your Chinese as well. So I hope you have a great lesson. I think you've got one coming up, haven't you?
I have indeed. Thank you very much. Well, it was lovely to take part in this. And if anyone has any questions about my experience, more than happy to get in touch and answer any questions too.
Absolutely. Please just drop us a message to info@opportunity-china.com, and we can pass you on to Hannah to get her to answer any questions that you might have as well. Thank you so much, Hannah.
You're very welcome. Thanks, everyone. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Excellent. Okay. Well, let's crack on then, and get on with a little bit of the meat for our session today. Today, we are going to have a little bit of a look at our pre-departure preparation. This is going to include COVID preparation. It's going to include looking at flights, looking at packing and insurance. We're also going to be taking a look at what you're going to need to do on arrival in China. We're going to be taking a look at quarantine, what to expect, and any culture shock that might come along with your experience in China as well. We'll also have a bit of an introduction to cross-cultural understanding amongst this. Well, let's take a little bit of a look, first of all, at pre-departure preparations. With pre-departure preparations, there are going to be several important steps that you will need to take. In normal years, we're going to be looking at document authentication, visa application, packing list and final items to remember, flights that you're going to need to book. But this year, of course, we have to take into account the deluge of other information that is needed in terms of health declarations, COVID tests, and other expected COVID-19 potential hurdles that you may need to overcome on your journey to China. Let's take a look first of all, though, at the practical implications of heading out to China and what you're going to need to do. First of all, there is document authentication. With document authentication, you will need to have your main items of documentation required as evidence that you can teach in China, which is your degree certificate, a no criminal record check. This can be a basic DBS if you're in the UK, state police check if you are in the United States, Royal Canadian Mounted Police check if you're in Canada, and many other equivalents as well. You'll also need a 120-hour TEFL certificate. Each of these qualifications will need to be notarized by a notary public in your home territory. These notary publics will write what's called a letter of attestation, which will essentially prove that your document is real and genuine. This will then need to be legalized by a relevant government body in your country. This can be the Foreign Commonwealth Office in the United Kingdom, Secretary of State in the United States, and many other equivalents as well. Then your document will need to go under a final examination and authentication, which will be done at the Visa for China Centre, embassy or consulate in your region. What we have on our website for those who are pre-departing is a very well-defined document guide for authenticating documents when heading out to China. So you can see a link that's just on there, and you'll be able to find this in our visa section in our website. The full authentication guide can be found here, and there are also small sections that you are able to click on where you can find guides for your relevant country. So if you're in the UK, you can see a step-by-step guide for authenticating your documents in the UK, same for the US, same for all relevant countries. So please do make sure when it comes to document authentication, you use this guide. When it comes to using this guide, you do not necessarily always need to do all these steps yourself as well. In fact, we recommend generally that you don't do all these steps yourself, as it can be quite a pain, it can be quite time consuming, and it can end up being quite expensive. So you are able to use a number of different services to authenticate your documents fully on your behalf. We do have a preferred partner who we use in the United Kingdom for this, but if you have any questions about any organisations that you would like to do this on your behalf, please do just drop us a message and we can help you with that as well. There's also the physical examination form that you will either be required to fill out or you'll be required to sign a letter simply stating that you are of sound body and mind and healthy to go out to China. If you're required to fill out the physical examination form, then it's not as scary as it may initially look. You're able to take this form, which can be downloaded, it's very simple, to a local doctor, health centre, GP, medical surgery, whatever the equivalent is in your country, and ask them to complete as much of the form as possible, stamping the form at the bottom. You can see here what the very top of it looks like. You need to pop a photo on top of that and have that stamped by the relevant medical authority as well. Most doctors will be able to use your previous records simply to tick the boxes, but there are a few tests on there that it says can be completed. What you need to do for these tests is just ask if your doctor can write NA, not applicable, or not completed, and that's absolutely fine as well. Don't worry about having to pay hundreds of dollars or pounds to do some of these tests. You don't need to do that. You just need to pay. You just need to have a doctor tick off what's relevant and then write NA or not applicable for things like the ECG test, the blood tests, the X-ray as well. You can find a full guide once again on Opportunity China's website just here on how to go about completing this. Now, for your visa application, once all of your authenticated documents, your fully authenticated documents, have been completed, you'll need to send those as well as your medical form if required to your school in China. They'll use these to apply for a notification of work permit and also currently in COVID times a PU letter. The timeline for this to be processed can vary wildly. In previous years, it would sometimes take around 4 to 6 weeks. In current years, in COVID times, it can take anywhere up to 2 months and sometimes even longer for these applications to take place. So do be prepared to be patient. Once you receive the letter, which will come in an email, the work permit notification letter, print it out and also print out your PU letter. And you will need to apply at your nearest Visa for China Centre or embassy for the USA, Ireland and New Zealand. You can find at visaforchina.org where your nearest Visa for China Centre is. There'll be an online visa application form that you will need to complete. This is all done online now. There used to be previous provision for it to be filled out via hand. Basically, every Visa for China Centre now requires it to be filled out online and printed at the end. Once you fill it out online, it doesn't send it to the Visa Centre. It just means it's typed online and you need to print it out. Don't ask me the logic why, it just is what it is. You'll then need to bring that along with 2 passport photos, your notification of work permit letter, passport PU letter and completed application form to the Visa for China Centre or embassy. Do bring along anything else that they ask you as well. We have heard it reported, although it is not necessarily universal, it may be the norm for some people to take proof of vaccination. Although China does not strictly recognise Western vaccinations, some Visa for China centres and visa application centres have been asking recently, or there has been that they've been asking recently for proof of vaccination. So if you're able to print out any NHS records that you have for that, that may potentially be beneficial as well. You will need to arrange for your visa once it's been processed in the Visa for China Centre to be picked up or mailed back to you. It usually takes 3 to 4 days for it to be picked up. It can take around a week for the postal service for it to be sent back. But again, the time scale for that does vary slightly. Now, let's talk a little bit about the PU letter. So this is something that is relevant at the moment for COVID times. Everyone who is currently applying to live and work in China and hasn't received 2 Chinese-produced vaccinations, these are predominantly Sinopharm and Sinovac, and a small number of other regional Chinese-produced vaccines, will need to have a PU letter in addition to their work permit notification letter. If you live in a country or have lived in a country by coincidence where you've been able to receive a Sinopharm or Sinovac vaccine, or if you have travelled to a country in order to receive it, then you don't need a PU letter, you just need a work permit notification letter. But if you live in the West and have received one of the Western vaccines, Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Janssen, all of the above, all Western one that you could possibly ask. So don't ask me a question in the box saying, is this one accepted? All Western vaccines and not accepted in lieu of a PU letter. If you've had a vaccination that's a Chinese one, you don't need a PU letter. If you've not had a Chinese vaccine, you do need one. It's as simple as that. We get asked this question quite a lot. It's applied for by your school, and it generally gets approved within 2 to 6 weeks, but sometimes is still rejected. Some schools have certain provisions for how many people they can take on. So don't worry necessarily if you read online that someone in the city where you're going has been approved one. There's no real science to it. Some people get their PU letters approved, some people just don't. It arrives alongside your work permit notification letter, and you will be able to use that and take that to the visa centre to apply for your visa. So what about getting your flight booked, and what about moving to China and actually getting everything sorted in that sense? Well, what you are really going to want to do is view our COVID pre-departure guide. In our COVID pre-departure guide, we have a full breakdown of everything you need to do. You are going to see a bit of a wall of text, but it is really important that you go through this, and you'll find that as you're doing it, as you're preparing to leave for China, it's not nearly as stressful or as worrying as you might think it is. If you're flying from the UK, as many of our participants are, then you'll currently need to transfer in a suitable European airport, as there are not presently any direct flights between the UK and China. Now, when you are transferring, you will need to have a second test. If you are travelling to China, you need to have a COVID test done 48 hours before or within 48 hours of boarding your first flight, and you need to also have a COVID test done in any transit area. So with no direct flights from the UK, you're only allowed to transit once, and you are only allowed to transit in airports that have on-site airside testing facilities. You can see a full guide of these airports on our pre-departure and quarantine guide. Ensure that you book a flight with guaranteed flexible ticket terms in case of any sudden changes. Now, the Chinese aviation authorities do suspend flights when there are confirmed cases on them and suspend flight routes. So it's important that you have a flexible flight ticket when you are travelling, and it's important that you maintain this as well. If you are flying from the UK, that is. If you're flying from any country that has a direct flight to China, then you need to take a direct flight with no stopovers. This looks like it is going to continue being the case for the foreseeable future. But any additional travel insurance that needs to be taken out should be taken out for this as well. We would certainly recommend that you take out travel insurance that facilitates you being able to get a refund for any flights that come out on top of that too. Now, with a packing list, you're going to want to make sure that you have everything you would usually want to take with you, but also prepare lots of snacks and creature comforts for your quarantine, and print and check off all the items that we have on our packing list. So you are going to be in quarantine potentially for around 2 weeks. So it is super important that you prepare for this and that you have everything that you're going to need for your quarantine. So make sure that you tick off everything you're going to want to take to China with you, as well as any snacks and creature comforts that you might have once you arrive. There's a lot of different things that you're going to want to be able to take with you, and once you're in quarantine, there will be the opportunity to have things delivered to you and help being given to you as well. But you're going to want to make sure that you have enough clothes. You're going to want to make sure that you have enough items that are going to be kept safe for you once you get there. Now, before you fly out to China, you're going to need to take a COVID test and have a certified health declaration form. These are all to be found in our guide for going to China. A negative COVID test must be taken and the result must be produced within 48 hours of boarding. you can refer to your Chinese embassy website for valid providers that a test can be taken in. You can't just take a test anywhere. It needs to be taken at a particular testing centre. A health declaration form and negative test result must be sent to the embassy to certify before your flight. So this needs to be sent out to an HDC website, and we have a full link. We have a full link on our website there. Health declaration forms must be for each individual flight if you're changing as well. Now, before you leave, absolutely do not forget to pay for and download a VPN. We work with ExpressVPN to provide a discount on their VPN services, but sometimes different VPNs work differently and generally do a little bit better than others. Make sure that you check off everything from your packing list that you might have. Also, ensure that you have your travel insurance booked. Make sure that absolutely everything is booked on there. Download and install WeChat onto your phone. Make sure that that's all ready for you. And do not forget your original and authenticated degree, TEFL and criminal record checks. So you will need to take all of your original documents that you had with you again, and make sure that they are taken with you to China. So does anyone have any questions on pre-departure just at the moment? Okay, no worries. In which case, let's move on and take a look at arriving in China. Well, I'm sure a big question that a lot of you currently have is, what happens when I first arrive in China with quarantine? Most likely, it's going to be 14 days quarantine, initially in the city where you first land. So even if you are going to be teaching in Beijing, if your transfer flight or if your direct flight goes to Shanghai, then your quarantine will take place in the city where you first land. The school will pay for or reimburse these costs up to a certain level, and the school will make clear how much of the cost will be paid or reimbursed to you. You cannot choose which hotel you're going to be staying at, unfortunately. Meals provided at most quarantine hotels, or your school will help you to order in food. The meals are generally always of a good standard, and almost always going to be more than enough and good enough to get by on. But a lot of quarantine hotels do also offer you the opportunity to have food delivered across a range of different Chinese food delivery apps. If you speak to your school or your HR representative, they'll be able to help you get food delivered in. If you fancy a KFC or something like that, as I certainly would, going through 14 days of quarantine. Your school will help you communicate with the quarantine hotel throughout your stay. So when you arrive in China and you are shuttled over towards your quarantine hotel, your school will be able to help you communicate with them and help you get through to them and speak with them. After flying to your home city, you may be required to undertake additional quarantine, which might potentially be at home or in a hotel, and or community monitoring, where you may just need to have your temperature checked each day and speak with a nurse every now and again, just to make sure that you're doing okay. With hotels and quarantine stay, your school will either pay for it up front or reimburse it. The majority of these hotels do not accept foreign credit cards, so you may potentially be best changing your money into cash when you first arrive in China, or asking if your school will be able to pay via WeChat Pay or Alipay on your behalf when you arrive at the quarantine hotel itself. So, we've got a little video just here of a really good Chinese blogger called Blondie in China. And she did her quarantine after arriving in China and showed us exactly what it looked like from arriving in the airport to going through into the quarantine hotel where she was going to be staying. So let's just take a quick little look at her experience when she first arrives at the hotel itself.
That we had arrived in the Panyu district of Guangzhou, and before long we were pulling up to the hotel where I would be spending the next 14 days of my life in. Our rooms were already allocated to us before we arrived, but there was so much paperwork and forms we needed to fill in before we could go up. My hotel room number, heading up to my room. Oh, what is gonna happen here? Oh, okay. This is me. Ooh. Okay, I am in. This is my room. It's actually really nice and sizable. Oh, my bathroom, quite nice, very large. I have a shower. Look at this grandeur. Isn't that grand? I'm very happy about this. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I'm just so tired, so I am going to sleep. And in the morning, I will inspect the room. I'll give you guys a tour, a better tour. But yeah, wow, this will be my home for the next 14 days. I'm really happy with it. This is great. Good morning. I had a lovely long night's sleep and I am ready to give you a tour of my quarantine hotel. So this is the front door, and then outside of the front door, there's a little chair where they can drop stuff like food, or you can put your rubbish. I have a nice big wardrobe and they provide hangers, so I've unpacked my things and I'm feeling really good about having everything nice and neatly. Now we move on to the bathroom, which is really nice and big. So we've got the shower here, they provide a lot of towels, got a nice big vanity with lots of space, and then they provide a lot of cleaning stuff like garbage bags. They've got some cleaning stuff, and I think even here they provide some laundry detergent, because I guess if we're going to be here for 2 weeks, we're going to need to clean some clothes at some time. Lovely, nice big bed. Loving these details on the walls, very chic. Look at these little lights. Look at these little details. Up here, you'll also see I have air conditioning, which I'm really, really happy about. My worst fear, well, one of my worst fear was getting to quarantine, and it's hot here in Guangzhou. It's super, super humid, and I was worried that maybe my aircon wouldn't work or I wouldn't have one, but it works, it's there, and yeah, I'm very, very happy. But what makes me even happier than the aircon is something that I just was not expecting, and I'm so, so pleasantly surprised by. I have a balcony that I can actually go out onto, so it's quite nice and spacious. I have a lovely view. I'm in the Panyu district of Guangzhou, so it's not like in the city center or anything, but actually in the distance over there I can see the Canton Tower, which is like the landmark building of Guangzhou. So this is actually a room with a view, and you can see it just on the horizon there. So I think the whole concept of quarantine has suddenly become a lot more palatable now that.
So you can just get a little bit of an idea there of the sort of accommodation that quarantine hotels are. They're generally quite comfortable, quite nice. They're not necessarily the Ritz, they're not necessarily a 5-star Hilton hotel, but they're certainly a place that you can live in for 14 days. Many of them may come with balconies, air conditioning, will work. You'll be able to talk to them and make sure that you're going to be comfortable in there for that. But the vast majority of quarantine hotels are really of a very, very high standard, and are considerably cheaper as well than the equivalents here. Depending on the city that you're going to be based in, the price can vary quite wildly, from 250 a night to up to 700 yuan a night. But your school will help pay for this and cover the whole cost, or at least the majority of the cost. So, once you're out of quarantine and into the light, what can you expect of living and working in China for your first few days? Well, firstly, there's the massive size and scale of the country. You're going to be walking out of a quarantine hotel room into a bustling, energetic, vibrant, positive environment. People are always willing to help. People are always wanting to talk to you. People are curious. People are interested in you, in where you're from, in what you're doing, and they'll be particularly interested to speak with you in the current situation, learning about what life's like currently in the UK under COVID times. There's, of course, the bright lights. There are the bright neon shining lights that go across the rivers. It's a country that looks incredibly different between day and night. It's a country where during the day you might wake up and see old-fashioned communist architecture alongside bright, shiny new glass buildings, whilst at night seeing those former old grey blocks lit up in beautiful neon, transforming the whole landscape into something very different and futuristic. There's a lot of noise, traffic, and energy that you can expect to experience living in China for the first few weeks. This is something that might come as a bit of a surprise to you at first, but also something that you can get super excited about whilst you're there. But what about actually being a foreigner in China? Well, China has a population of over 1.4 billion people, and among them is a 92% majority ethnic Han and an almost 8% majority other Chinese ethnicities. So essentially, everyone looks Chinese. Now, you are going to stand out. Whether you're white, whether you're black, whether you're brown, you are going to stand out in an environment of majority Chinese. And they are going to notice you, stare, want to talk to you, sometimes want to take pictures. But it all comes from a place of curiosity, and it comes from a positive place. I lived in China for many years, and I never experienced any serious negative instance of racism or prejudice. But you've got to be chilled out, and you've got to be relaxed about the fact that this is a country where they're not used to seeing people who aren't Chinese necessarily, even though it's the 21st century, even though China is outward looking. Especially if you're going to be living in a second or a third tier city, it's going to be a little bit more unusual to be seen. But don't be put off by it. Don't think it's aggressive. Don't think it comes out of a bad place. It very much comes out of a place of curiosity and cultural difference. It's not like here, if you see someone of a different colour and you stare at them, you see someone staring at them, usually you would think or associate that with they're suspicious of them, or they're looking at them as if they're going to do something bad or wrong. In China, it is very much a place of curiosity. And of course, being a foreigner in China, you've got to be used to the fact that there are very different social and political models that exist when it comes to ordering a society, when it comes to knowing what is important in a country or society. We always stress this to everyone who goes to China. Your opinions matter. You have freedom of speech in this country, here in the UK or the US, but that doesn't mean that you need to go out to China and just criticize things. You're not going to be taken away by men in black. You're not going to be shut down by the police. You're not going to be deported or thrown in a jail cell for saying something negative about the Chinese government. That's simply not going to happen. But you may potentially offend people, and you've got to look at the history between China and other countries in order to best understand that. So always use your discretion. Be sensible about what you say. And if you have a few drinks in a bar and you end up deciding to talk politics with someone, with a Chinese person, maybe don't go down the road of criticizing their culture, their way of life, their country, their development model all that much, because there is still a lot of sensitivity. And we'll be going through in a few other sessions that we'll be having this week why that sensitivity exists and why you should be careful about it and mindful and respectful of the fact that you are living in another country with a very different culture. Speaking of which, there are many expat communities that exist in China throughout all different cities. If you're in a second or a third tier city, there will likely just be a single expat community in your city, generally located close to the consulate or embassy district of the city where you're going to be living in. These expat communities often are an amalgamation of bars, restaurants, social clubs. You will find expat communities in every city that you go into in China incredibly welcoming and incredibly helpful for people when they arrive in China for the first time, because everyone in those communities has been there. Everyone has had the initial culture shock of arriving and living in China for the very first time and seeing exactly what it's going to be like. So going and coexisting with these expat communities is massively important for helping you establish yourself in China. However, the biggest issue that you can have, and the biggest mistake, the biggest folly that all those going to China for the first time have, is just sticking to the expat community. Not going and speaking to your Chinese work colleagues, not going and making Chinese friends, because that will stop you from learning Chinese, that will stop you from learning about the culture, that will stop you from having a broader mindset of things. And if you get stuck, particularly with some of the older expats who often just moan about China or moan about being there the whole time, despite the fact they've stayed there for 20 years, that can really set you off on a negative edge. Go to the expat communities. They'll help you out, they'll introduce you. But also go to your Chinese friends. Even if it's harder, even if it feels more intimidating, don't just go for the easy option and stick with it. Go for the harder option too, or the one that feels harder at first, because that's what you'll get the most out of. So a few quick do's and don'ts. Gift giving is a massive part of Chinese culture. So when you arrive in China for your school, if you prepare a little gift for them, that'll be something that'll be really well appreciated. Because when you arrive as well, your school will probably give you lots of little homemaking gifts and things that will help you out for whilst you're there. So giving something that shows your appreciation, and also something that represents where you're from. So maybe some tea that comes from a town or village where you're from, or some chocolate that's representative of your place, or like a little teddy bear with a Union Jack shirt, anything like that. Just general tat, or things that seems like tat to us, but to others might actually be quite meaningful and quite special. There are differences in China. Some of you are going to be going to the north, some of you are going to be going to the south. Some of you might think, oh, Chinese people are very direct. They always say exactly what they mean. They always say exactly what comes to their mind. And others of you might go, no, Chinese people are very indirect. You need to basically really figure out what they're trying to ask you beforehand. This is a big cultural difference between the north and south. And going to the north of China, you'll find that the culture is very different. In the north of China, rice is eaten more commonly. In the south, it's noodles. In the north of China, people will just simply eat in a restaurant. In the south, they might wash their bowls or wash their plates again before eating. You might find the north to be a little bit louder, people in the north a little bit taller, and certainly the weather a fair bit colder. Please do avoid political conversations in China as well. It's generally not worth having. Like I say, you're not going to get taken away by anyone or put in any prisons for saying something. But having conversations that might be sensitive can sometimes cause arguments and misunderstandings. Sensitive about national criticism comes as part of that. And there are different taboos that exist in China as well. For instance, if you're sitting down at someone's house, don't put your feet up and point your feet towards anyone. That's a pretty big insult. When you finished eating a bowl of rice or noodles, don't do what is done here and stick them down inside it, as that indicates death. And there are many others that we'll go through as well. Of course, it's also important to realise the importance of food in China. Food is massively important and an intrinsic part of the culture. Because of that, showing appreciation of food, things like slurping, noodles at the dinner table is perfectly acceptable. If you're in a restaurant, currently there is a massive national drive to clean your plate, make sure that you don't waste. So do try to finish absolutely everything if you're eating at a restaurant. If you're eating at someone's house, always make sure you leave a little bit of food on the table. Otherwise, they will feel like they've not prepared enough for you and keep sending more food out for you. Now, if anyone has any questions about arrival in China, please do feel free to pop those across to us at info@opportunity-china.com. Or if you have any questions now as well, please feel free just to let us know in our chat box. Otherwise, we can continue just again. Okay, let's talk a little bit about culture shock then. There are a few different stages of culture shock that exist in China. The first is the honeymoon stage, the positive shock. Seeing the bright lights and energy of a city that you're entering and trying the new food that you're going to see. When you see the sun rise up over your first morning in China, it can feel like a genuine adventure, full of things that are going to be new to you, full of wonderful experiences that you will have never had before in your life. Making new friends is going to be something that'll be exciting. Going into those expat communities for the first time, speaking with people, learning about their China experiences, trying to find out where are the best places to eat, where are the best places to drink, where are the best clubs to go to make friends, where are the best social activities to take part in the city where you're going to be. And one of the big things that you're going to notice are the huge levels of energy that exist in China. The bustling streets, the busy motorways, absolutely everything feels like it's turned up to 100. And during this time period of excitement and energy, it's almost going to feel like an extended holiday. Most of those at this early stage, they'll go into work and they'll quite enjoy the company of their kids as well that they're teaching. The kids might bring them snacks in their breaks. Everyone will be bending over backwards to be welcoming and inclusive and offer a good first impression of the school. And all of these things seem exciting, interesting. Things that go wrong or don't work just seem funny at first. And if you're in a second-tier city, everything is so cheap. Even in a first-tier city, things like food and groceries are just so cheap for you. But then, of course, that doesn't last forever. And you begin to go into the frustration stage. You begin to get fatigue, not understanding the language, the gestures, going onto a tightly packed tube and seeing everyone just staring at their phone, but then shuffling past you. You begin to think, oh, this is such an annoying place. This is so irritating. People don't have manners. I'm not sure what I'm going to be able to do about this. You might at work start to experience maybe some straightforward criticism where one of your TAs whose English isn't so good might say, oh, I didn't like your lesson today. You can do this better maybe. As opposed to the soft roundabout way that we might say this in the West. And your self-esteem might go down a little bit because of that type of communication. You might begin to feel frustration at the surroundings that you have around you. Being in a different culture, you might begin to resent things, resent just hearing the same annoying little noise from a bicycle that's selling fruit, repeating the same slogan now every 5 seconds and thinking, God, I hate this country and I just want to leave. Why is everything so irritating? And small incessant things will just begin to bother you. Like a pothole outside your apartment building full of water that you'll accidentally step into every day, or some of the expats who love bitching about other ones that just gets on your nerves. The fast pace of China can just become chaotic. It can start to feel like everything is disorganized and doesn't work properly, and every grievance that you have becomes exaggerated by a feeling of homesickness, by a feeling of false pretense that everything at home is slightly better. These small friendship groups that you come across in these expat communities can become tense. But most of all, you begin to feel homesick. You begin to miss those home comforts, those simple things. Even the smell of home, the smell of your home country genuinely becomes something that you miss and crave for. But this, of course, doesn't last forever. And we move into the adjustment stage after that, where these frustrations become more subdued. You begin to acclimatise to the pace and cultural differences. You begin to pick up more of the language. You begin to learn a fair bit more of what's being said, and you begin to adapt and develop. And this is where speaking with and getting to know Chinese colleagues is massively important. You then get to establish a regular routine inside and outside of work. And this really begins to help you once you start working and feeling a fluent flow of a daily routine. And finally, you have the acceptance stage, where you become familiar with cultural differences. You feel more comfortable with your language level and ability if you've been able to get that. You've got an established social group. You feel more established at work. It begins to feel more like a home to you. But then, of course, when you return to your home country, you will get reverse culture shock, and I certainly did. The biggest thing that I noticed was the slower pace of life. This really was something that struck me massively on my return to China. The slower pace of life. It seemed to slow right down to a crawl. Things seemed uneventful and even mundane to an extent. There were changes at home that became stark and sudden once I came back. And I started to feel in a way that I had been left behind by friendship groups that had gone forward, and there was a difficulty re-establishing myself to regular working life. But this comes and this goes, and you find yourself back in a position where you are able to re-establish a sense of familiarity, of being at home, and that initial culture shock that may engage you to come back isn't always necessarily going to last forever. Well, tomorrow we're going to have a more involved guide to teaching in China, and I hope you'll all be able to join us for that. But if you have any final questions or anything at all that you want to ask that you feel we haven't covered today, please do send those across to info@opportunity-china.com, and we'll go through that for you and answer any questions that you might have in that sense. But otherwise, it's been lovely to speak with you all, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much, take care, and goodbye.